When we begin talking about erotic intelligence in marriage, we have to start with a paradox, one that many couples experience but very few openly discuss. Marriage asks us to satisfy two deeply human needs that often pull us in opposite directions. On one side, we long for security, the comfort of knowing that someone is there for us, that we are chosen, that we belong. On the other side, we long for excitement, for novelty, for the thrill of discovering something new. Love tends to grow in the presence of safety and predictability, while desire often awakens in the presence of mystery and uncertainty. This tension is something that relationship thinker Esther Perel has explored extensively. She often reminds us that the qualities that nurture love are not always the same qualities that sustain desire. Love wants closeness, desire needs space. Love seeks reassurance, desire thrives on the unknown. And yet, in modern marriage, we ask one person to give us everything: emotional security, friendship, stability, passion, excitement, and lifelong erotic connection. Historically, marriage was never designed to carry all of these expectations. For centuries, marriage was primarily an economic and social arrangement. Passion might appear, but it was not considered essential for the survival of the relationship. Today, however, we marry for love, and we also expect that love to remain passionate for decades. In many ways, modern couples are asking marriage to do something it has never been asked to do before. And so the paradox emerges. The more we rely on our partner for safety and predictability, the more we may unintentionally reduce the very elements that spark erotic energy. Desire often thrives on a certain distance, on the ability to look at the other person as someone separate from ourselves. But when life becomes deeply intertwined, shared bills, shared responsibilities, shared routines, partners can begin to see each other less as mysterious individuals and more as teammates managing a household. Think about how many couples gradually shift from lovers to logistical partners. Conversations revolve around groceries, work schedules, children, deadlines, and responsibilities. None of these things are inherently harmful. In fact, they are the very fabric of a shared life. But when the relationship becomes entirely organized around efficiency and responsibility, something subtle can disappear: the sense of intrigue. Erotic intelligence invites us to recognize that desire is not simply a biological impulse that appears automatically. It is a psychological experience shaped by how we see our partner. In the early stages of a relationship, we are fascinated by the other person. We observe them closely. We wonder about them. There is curiosity, imagination, and anticipation. Over time, familiarity replaces curiosity. We believe we know the other person completely. The mystery dissolves, and without realizing it, we stop looking at them with the same attentive gaze that once made them so captivating. But here is the crucial insight: the loss of desire in marriage is often not about a lack of love. In many cases, the opposite is true. Couples care deeply for each other. They are loyal, supportive, and emotionally committed. Yet the very closeness that strengthens the bond can sometimes weaken the spark. Erotic intelligence means learning to hold two truths at the same time. You can be deeply connected to your partner and still allow space for individuality. You can share a life together and still remain curious about each other. The goal is not to reduce closeness, but to recognize that desire requires a certain psychological distance. Sometimes the most powerful moment of attraction happens when you see your partner in a new light, when you watch them doing something independently, something that reveals a part of them you had forgotten or never noticed before. In that moment, you are reminded that the person you live with is not just your partner in routine. They are a separate, complex human being with their own inner world. That realization can reignite fascination. Erotic intelligence begins with accepting that stability and passion are not natural allies. They are forces that must be consciously balanced. Marriage provides the structure of security, but desire requires moments of unpredictability within that structure. When couples understand this paradox, they stop interpreting the fluctuations of desire as a failure of the relationship. Instead, they see it as a signal, a reminder that love and passion operate by different rules. And perhaps the most important shift is this: instead of asking, "Why did the passion disappear?" we begin asking a much more empowering question: how can we create the conditions where desire has room to return? Because passion in marriage does not survive by accident. It survives by awareness, and the moment we understand the paradox between security and excitement is the moment we begin to cultivate that awareness. The truth is simple, yet profound. Love seeks closeness, but desire needs space, and the art of a passionate marriage lies in learning how to hold both at the same time. If we continue exploring erotic intelligence in marriage, we arrive at another essential insight. Desire is deeply connected to individuality. One of the quiet ironies of long-term relationships is that the very thing that brings two people closer together can also make them lose the very qualities that once attracted them to each other. Over time, couples can become so intertwined that their identities begin to blur. They think together, move together, decide together, and gradually live within a shared rhythm that feels safe, but sometimes leaves little room for personal distinctiveness. But desire does not thrive in total fusion. Desire requires the presence of another person who is, in some meaningful way, separate from us. It feeds on the awareness that the person we love has their own thoughts, their own passions, their own inner world that we cannot fully control or completely know. This is where the concept often discussed by Esther Perel becomes so powerful. She reminds us that erotic energy depends on the ability to see our partner not only as someone who belongs to us, but also as someone who exists independently from us. In other words, the erotic gaze requires distance, not emotional distance that creates disconnection, but psychological distance that preserves individuality. Think back to the early stages of a relationship. When you first meet someone, you are captivated by who they are. You observe how they think, how they move through the world, what excites them, what challenges them. Their independence is not threatening, it is intriguing. You are drawn to the parts of them that are different from you. Yet over time, many couples unconsciously move toward total merging. They begin to organize their lives so closely together that personal exploration becomes less common. Individual interests shrink. Curiosity fades. Partners stop evolving separately and begin operating primarily as a unit. At first glance, this may appear to be the ideal relationship. After all, we often associate closeness with unity. We celebrate couples who say they do everything together. But when two people become too fused, something important can quietly disappear. The sense of discovery fades, and discovery is essential for desire. Erotic intelligence recognizes that attraction is not only about physical chemistry, it is also about perception. It is about how we see the other person. When your partner becomes completely predictable, when every reaction is familiar and every habit is known, the mind stops wondering, and when curiosity disappears, the imaginative spark that fuels desire can begin to dim. But individuality reintroduces that spark. When partners continue to grow as individuals, pursuing interests, developing skills, exploring ideas, they bring new energy back into the relationship. They become someone who can still surprise you. This is why moments of attraction in long-term relationships often happen in unexpected situations. Perhaps you watch your partner giving a presentation at work, confidently expressing ideas you had never heard them articulate before. Maybe you see them immersed in a hobby or a passion that reveals a different side of their personality. Suddenly, you are reminded that the person you share your daily life with is not just the familiar companion of routine. They are a dynamic individual. And in that moment, you see them differently. You are not simply looking at the partner who sits across from you at dinner every night. You are seeing someone with depth, creativity, capability, and mystery. That shift in perception can be profoundly erotic. What erotic intelligence teaches us is that healthy distance is not the enemy of intimacy. In fact, it can be the very thing that sustains it. When two people maintain their individuality, they create a relationship that is not static but alive, constantly evolving because each partner continues to evolve. This does not mean withdrawing from each other or building emotional walls. Quite the opposite. It means bringing your full, developing self into the relationship rather than disappearing into it. It means allowing your partner the same freedom. Paradoxically, the more secure a relationship becomes, the more freedom it should allow for individuality. Security should not be a cage. It should be a foundation from which both partners can explore the world and return with new experiences, perspectives, and energy. And when that happens, something remarkable occurs. The relationship becomes a place not only of comfort, but of continuous rediscovery. You do not stop learning about the person you love. You remain curious about them. And curiosity is the quiet engine of desire. The couples who sustain passion over time are rarely the ones who try to merge into a single identity. They are the ones who remain two distinct individuals choosing again and again to share their lives. Because in the end, erotic intelligence is not about creating distance to escape love. It is about preserving enough individuality that the person beside you never stops being someone worth discovering. As marriages evolve over time, another quiet transformation often takes place, one that many couples barely notice until the effects become deeply felt. The relationship gradually shifts from a space of romantic connection into a system of responsibilities. Two people who once met in curiosity and excitement slowly become partners in management. They begin managing a household, managing finances, managing schedules, managing children, managing extended family, and managing the endless list of tasks that adult life demands. And to be clear, none of this is a failure of the relationship. In fact, it is often a sign of commitment and stability. Building a shared life requires cooperation and responsibility. It requires organization, planning, and reliability. But there is a subtle psychological shift hidden within this transformation. The person who once felt like a source of mystery and excitement begins to feel increasingly familiar in a different way. They become the person who reminds you about bills, who coordinates appointments, who discusses grocery lists and work deadlines. The romantic partner slowly becomes the logistical partner. This shift is something that relationship expert Esther Perel often highlights when discussing long-term desire. She observes that many couples do not lose attraction because love has disappeared. They lose it because the roles within the relationship have become dominated by practicality. When partners spend most of their time solving problems together, they start seeing each other primarily through the lens of responsibility. The relationship becomes focused on efficiency rather than imagination. Think about the daily rhythm of many marriages. Conversations happen in short bursts between tasks. One person is answering emails while the other is finishing dinner. Discussions revolve around logistics. What needs to be done? What must be planned? What problem must be solved next? In these moments, both partners are functioning as teammates. Teamwork is essential for building a life together, but erotic energy rarely emerges in the middle of logistical coordination. Desire thrives in moments where the mind can wander, where imagination can play, where attention is not divided between a dozen responsibilities. When every interaction is practical, the relationship begins to feel like a partnership of productivity. And productivity is not inherently erotic. Another factor contributes to this shift. When we live closely with someone for many years, we begin to see every side of them, their habits, their routines, their moods, their imperfections. Familiarity deepens our understanding of them, which strengthens emotional intimacy. But it can also reduce the sense of intrigue. We stop observing them with curiosity because we believe we already know the script. The human mind, however, responds strongly to novelty. Desire is often awakened when we encounter something unexpected. When the relationship becomes dominated by predictable routines, the brain stops searching for novelty within that dynamic. This is not because the partner has become less interesting. It is because the context through which we experience them has narrowed. Erotic intelligence invites couples to widen that context again. One way to think about this is to recognize that the roles we play in daily life are not the entirety of who we are. The person who manages finances or organizes family schedules also has dreams, creativity, humor, and complexity that may not always appear in routine interactions. But when the relationship becomes entirely focused on management, those dimensions can fade into the background. The challenge, then, is not simply to reduce responsibilities. That is rarely realistic. The challenge is to remember that a marriage must be more than a well-functioning system. It must also remain a space where two people encounter each other as individuals, not only as co-managers of life. This often requires conscious effort. It means creating moments where the practical roles temporarily fall away. Moments where partners can look at each other not as problem solvers but as human beings with stories, ideas, and desires. Sometimes this shift happens in surprisingly simple ways. A conversation that moves beyond daily logistics, a shared experience that interrupts routine, a moment where one partner reveals something personal, creative, or vulnerable. In those moments, the relationship briefly steps outside the structure of management. And when that happens, perception changes. You are no longer looking at the person who organizes the calendar or reminds you about responsibilities. You are looking at the person you once found fascinating. That shift in perception can quietly reopen the door to desire. The couples who maintain passion over time are not the ones who eliminate responsibility from their lives. They are the ones who refuse to let responsibility define the entire relationship. They understand that love requires cooperation, but desire requires imagination. And imagination cannot thrive in a space where every interaction is about efficiency. So the real question becomes this: in the midst of building a life together, can you still create moments where the relationship is not about managing life, but about experiencing each other? Because the moment your partner stops being only your teammate and becomes, once again, someone you truly see, the spark has a chance to return. If we accept the paradox between love and desire, if we recognize the importance of individuality, and if we understand how easily relationships can turn into systems of management, then the final question becomes inevitable. How do couples actually revive erotic energy within the structure of marriage? The answer is not as complicated as many people imagine, but it does require intention. Desire rarely returns simply because we wish for it. It is not something that appears automatically with time, nor is it something that can be demanded. Instead, desire emerges when certain psychological conditions are present. Conditions that allow imagination, curiosity, and emotional vitality to re-enter the relationship. In many ways, erotic intelligence is about becoming conscious of these conditions. One of the most powerful insights often shared by Esther Perel is that desire thrives on newness. Not necessarily new partners, but new experiences, new perspectives, and new ways of seeing the person we already know. The brain is highly responsive to novelty. When something unexpected occurs, attention sharpens, awareness deepens. We begin to observe more closely, and observation is where attraction begins. In long-term relationships, however, routine tends to narrow our perception. When life becomes predictable, we stop paying close attention to the person beside us. Not because they have become less interesting, but because the context has become too familiar. Our minds conserve energy by assuming we already know what will happen next. Erotic intelligence challenges this assumption. It invites couples to deliberately introduce moments that interrupt the automatic rhythm of routine. This does not necessarily require dramatic gestures or extravagant changes. In fact, the most meaningful shifts are often subtle. What matters is the psychological effect, breaking the pattern. Patterns create comfort, but they also create blindness. When something disrupts the pattern, perception awakens again. Think about how attraction often resurfaces during moments of change. Perhaps a couple travels somewhere unfamiliar together. Suddenly they are navigating new environments, sharing new experiences, and reacting to situations they have never encountered before. In that unfamiliar setting, partners often see sides of each other that daily life had hidden. The same dynamic can occur in many forms: trying something new together, exploring different environments, engaging in conversations that go beyond routine topics, even changing the physical context of the relationship, stepping outside the spaces where daily responsibilities dominate. These moments remind us that the relationship is not a finished story. It is still unfolding. Another important dimension of reviving desire involves the way partners see each other. Over time, couples develop fixed mental images of who the other person is. We begin to say things like, "That's just how they are," or "I know exactly what they'll say." These assumptions create a psychological closure. But human beings are never static. We are constantly evolving, learning, adapting, growing in ways that even we may not fully recognize. Erotic intelligence invites us to look at our partner with fresh eyes, to allow the possibility that there are still aspects of them we have not yet discovered. This shift in perception can transform the way attraction emerges. Instead of seeing a familiar figure defined by routine, we begin to notice the complexity that still exists beneath the surface. In many cases, desire returns not because the partner changed dramatically, but because the way we see them changed. Another key factor is presence. In modern life, attention is fragmented. Conversations are interrupted by phones, work pressures, and countless distractions. Even when couples spend time together, their focus may be divided, but attraction requires attention. When someone feels truly seen, when they sense that the other person is fully present in the moment, it creates a powerful emotional connection. Presence communicates value. It tells the other person, right now, you matter, and that feeling can be profoundly energizing within a relationship. Reviving desire also requires a willingness to step outside the predictable roles we have adopted. The responsible planner, the problem solver, the caretaker, the organizer, these roles are necessary for daily life, but they can sometimes become rigid identities within the relationship. Erotic intelligence asks partners to occasionally step beyond those roles and reconnect with the more playful, spontaneous parts of themselves. The parts that existed before routine defined the structure of the relationship. When partners encounter each other in those moments of creativity, curiosity, or surprise, the dynamic changes. They are no longer interacting only through familiar patterns. They are meeting again as individuals. And that meeting can reignite the spark that once felt effortless in the early stages of love. Ultimately, sustaining passion in marriage is not about returning to the past. It is about creating a future where the relationship remains alive, evolving, and open to rediscovery, because the most enduring form of desire is not based on nostalgia. It is based on curiosity about who your partner is becoming, curiosity about what you can still discover together, and when that curiosity remains alive, something remarkable happens. The person you have known for years can begin to feel once again like someone new, and sometimes all it takes to awaken desire is the willingness to see them that way.